March 9th, 2018. The most impactful day in competitive Pokemon's history.
There's a star! It's a hit! The star! Gonna go! No! What? Are you kidding me? He's dead what?
Eduardo Jr. is your 2022 Pokemon World Champion!
The Indigo Disc DLC will be out soon, and while a lot of people are excited about seeing new Pokemon for the first time and seeing old favorites return, competitive players are dealing with a sense of dread in their stomach, because he is coming back. Incineroar will be returning, and players are scared. Why though? Today, let's look at the history of the most important competitive Pokemon ever. Incineroar started life pretty humbly. Its only ability was Blaze, the default ability for Fire-type starter Pokemon, which raises the damage of Fire-type moves by 50% if its HP drops to 1/3 or lower. Pretty strong, but situational and hard to set up. It has pretty freaking good stats though. Very bulky, with 95 HP and 90 in both defenses and a pretty solid 115 attack stat. Its speed is a pretty bad base 60, but definitely not a deal breaker. In 2017, Incineroar saw a decent amount of play, with access to good disruptive moves like Fake Out and Taunt, strong attacks like Flare Blitz, U-Turn, Darkest Lariat, and Knockoff. It had plenty going for it, but there was one more thing. Z-moves were the generational gimmick in Sun and Moon, a once per game, insanely powerful attack a Pokemon could use if it was holding a Z crystal. For most Pokemon, they'd use one of the 18 generic type-based Z crystals, Normalium Z, Waterium Z, etc. But certain Pokemon had access to signature Z moves that only worked if they used a specific attack while holding their signature Z crystal. For Incineroar, if you gave it an Incinium Z and it had the move Darkest Lariat, it could use the move Malicious Moonsault, a 180 base power Dark-type attack that also, for some reason, does double damage to targets if they've used Minimize. But focus here, this is about the insane damage, not being a chancy counter. This combination of tools, combined with how well it was able to switch into some of the most powerful threats in the metagame, like Alolan Marowak, Tapu Fini, and Arcanine, let Incineroar have some pretty solid success. Top 4 in the Athens Regional Championship in January of 2017, and top 4 in the Korean National Championships in the hands of Seijin Park, along with a few other solid finishes. Incineroar was finding its place as a pretty decent Pokemon, a good tool for when the metagame lined up. And then, it happened. Real quick, before we get into Incineroar's dominant era, why don't you fake out that subscribe button? March 9th, 2018. The most impactful day in competitive Pokemon's history. That day, Pokemon Bank, a program used to store your Pokemon and move them between games, gained compatibility with Sun and Moon. And, for linking your game up, you got 3 mystery gifts: Liquid Voice Primarina, Long Reach Decidueye, and Intimidate Incineroar. Intimidate is one of the strongest abilities in the game, lowering your opponent's Pokemon's physical attack by 1 stage on switch-in. The ability to weaken your opponent's Pokemon just by sending one of yours out is insanely powerful, because it limits their ability to deal damage without spending a move to do it. If you lead it on turn 1, you've debuffed your opponent's Pokemon, and still get to make an attack with both of yours. If you switch in an Intimidate Pokemon, you get the effect and get to reposition. It's extremely impactful on the game without being difficult to use. And Incineroar, that's great bulk and solid defensive typing, was perfectly suited to take advantage of this ability. It took it from being pretty bulky to absolutely ridiculous to try to knock out. How did players adapt to this change? Well, Pokemon Bank released March 9th, and on March 10th, there was the Argentina special event. Incineroar took 7th, 6th, 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and 1st place.
Sensational.
Yeah, from here, Incineroar was everywhere. The most common set was Figgy Berry for recovery, and a set of Flare Blitz, Knockoff, Fake Out, and U-Turn. This set went on basically any team. The tools that Incineroar provided, between flinches with Fake Out, item disruption with Knockoff, pivoting with U-Turn, and good damage with Flare Blitz on an Intimidator, why wouldn't you run it? You might say, well scraw, surely teams that had anti-synergy with, like Rain, wouldn't run it, and you would be wrong. Emilio Forbes' 2nd place world team this year featured both Drizzle Politoed and Incineroar. Oh, and Incineroar also won Worlds in the hands of Paul Ruiz. After Worlds, the format changed, and powerful legendaries like Xerneas and Groudon became legal, so Incineroar probably got less popular, right? Nope, it was still everywhere, I tricked you. While many players kept the same Recovery Berry, Fake Out, Flare Blitz, U-Turn knockoff set that was standard before, small adjustments started to be made. For example, at the 2019 Oceania International Championships, Gabriel Agati ran an Assault Vest Incineroar, opting for more special defense instead of healing, and he went for Snarl instead of Knockoff. Snarl is a spread move that lowers the special attack of the Pokemon it hits, very useful to mitigate powerful special attackers like Yveltal and Lunala, who were everywhere in the format. But the innovation didn't stop there. Other players opted to run Roar on their Incineroar, Incineroar to stop their opponent from setting up Trick Room by forcing the Pokemon to switch out before it can move. And others, like Wolf Glick, use safety goggles to protect their Incineroar from Amoonguss' spores and rage powders. Throughout 2019, we had one of the most powerful formats the game has ever seen, with legendaries and Mega Evolution and Z moves all being legal at the same time. And still, there was Incineroar, slowing its opponents down so its partners could prosper. Unsurprisingly, Incineroar won its second Worlds in 2019. Incineroar continued to dominate for the rest of Generation 7's life cycle, and then we reached Sword and Shield. Knockoff was one of the most important moves in Incineroar's kit, but Incineroar lost access to it in the switch from Generation 7 to Generation 8. With the departure of such an important move, there was no shot Incineroar would be as dominant this time, right? Well, going into the generation, Incineroar got access to Parting Shot, a move that lowers the target's attack and special attack, then switches the user out. This move was extremely powerful on Incineroar. A pretty common way to deal with Intimidate is just to switch your Pokemon out to reset the drops. But now, Incineroar could punish that. If you try to switch out your Pokemon, and Incineroar used Parting Shot targeting that Pokemon, whoever got switched in would have their stats lowered, and you would still be left with a Pokemon with weakened offenses. And Incineroar would be safely off the field, ready to come back in to fake out and intimidate once again. Now, Incineroar wasn't immediately legal in Sword and Shield, but had to wait until March of 2020, where of course, immediately after, there was 2 Incineroar in the top 8 of the first regional, and then 3 in the next. Parting Shot Incineroar lined up very well into Generation 8's gimmick, Dynamax. Dynamax allowed a Pokemon to grow huge for 3 turns, doubling its HP, turning all of its moves into powerful max moves with broken secondary effects like raising both your Pokemon's speeds. In Sword and Shield, VGC games often revolved around getting as much out of your Dynamax as possible while mitigating your opponents. Incineroar was a great tool for that mitigation, debuffing your opponent's Dynamax, making its precious max turns less effective. Now, of course, we all know what happens after March 2020. COVID shut down the live circuit and replaced it with the Players' Cup, a series of online events. But before the first Players' Cup, on June 17th, 2020, the Isle of Armor was released, and with it came Urshifu Rapid Strike, a water fighting type Pokemon, whose signature move, Surging Strikes, always critically hits. Critical hits in Pokemon ignore stat drops like Intimidate. A powerful legendary Pokemon that ignores Intimidate and hits Incineroar for super effective damage? Surely this time it was the end of Incineroar, right? Nope, they worked together.
Emotional damage!
The core of Rillaboom, Urshifu Rapid Strike, and Incineroar won the first 2 Players' Cups, and as Urshifu got less popular in the metagame, Incineroar showed no signs of stopping, winning the next 2 Players' Cups as well. Yes, it looks like every Pokemon that seems like it's going to stop Incineroar just becomes another partner for it instead. Once live tournaments returned, Incineroar's results continued to be uncountably large, winning the World Championships once again. Incineroar has won every World Championship it's been legal for since it's been allowed to use Intimidate. And so, here we are in the present day. In just about a month, the King of VGC will be back, and with Terrestrialization available, he'll be even more difficult to knock out than before, giving it all the time in the world to pivot around, debuff stats, and just to be a nuisance. This video could have been 10 hours long, but I think we did a pretty good job covering the basics of what happened with Incineroar. Some players actually think Incineroar is healthy for the metagame, that its support toolkit slows the game down and makes it more interactive. But what do you think? Are you excited for Incineroar's return, or dreading it? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Bye.